Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass, was a pogrom against Jews carried out by the Nazi Party's Sturmabteilung, SA, paramilitary and Schutzstaffel, SS, paramilitary forces, along with some participation from the Hitler Youth and German civilians throughout Nazi Germany on 9 November 10, 1938. The German authorities looked on without intervening. The euphemistic name Kristallnacht, literally Crystal Night, comes from the shards of broken glass that litter the streets after the windows of Jewish-owned stores, buildings, and synagogues were smashed. The pretext for the attacks was the assassination of the German diplomat Ernst von Rau by Herschel Grünspahn, a 17-year-old German-born Polish Jew living in Paris. Jewish homes, hospitals and schools were ransacked as attackers demolished buildings with sledgehammers. Rioters destroyed 267 synagogues throughout Germany, Austria, and the Sudetenland. Over 7,000 Jewish businesses were damaged or destroyed, and 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and incarcerated in concentration camps. British historian Martin Gilbert wrote that no event in the history of German Jews between 1933 and 1945 was so widely reported as it was happening, and the accounts from foreign journalists working in Germany drew worldwide attention. The Times of London observed on November 11, 1938, "No foreign propaganda spent upon blackening Germany before the world could outdo the tale of burnings and beatings, of blackguardly assaults on defenseless and innocent people, which disgraced that country yesterday." Estimates of fatalities caused by the attacks have varied. Early reports estimated that 91 Jews had been murdered. Modern analysis of German scholarly sources puts the figure much higher. When deaths from post-arrest maltreatment and subsequent suicides are included, the death toll reaches the hundreds, with Richard J. Evans estimating 638 deaths by suicide. Historians view Kristallnacht as a prelude to the final solution in the murder of 6 million Jews during the Holocaust. The subsequent 1935 Nuremberg laws stripped German Jews of their citizenship and prohibited Jews from marrying non-Jewish Germans. These laws resulted in the exclusion and alienation of Jews from German social and political life. Many sought asylum abroad, hundreds of thousands immigrated, but as Chaim Weitzman wrote in 1936, the world seemed to be divided into two parts, those places where the Jews could not live and those where they could not enter. The International Evian Conference on July 6, 1938 addressed the issue of Jewish and Romani immigration to other countries. By the time the conference took place, more than 250,000 Jews had fled Germany and Austria, which had been annexed by Germany in March 1938. More than 300,000 German and Austrian Jews continued to seek refuge and asylum from oppression. As the number of Jews in Romani wanting to leave increased, the restrictions against them grew, with many countries tightening their rules for admission. By 1938, Germany had entered a new radical phase in anti-Semitic activity. Some historians believe that the Nazi government had been contemplating a planned outbreak of violence against the Jews and were waiting for an appropriate provocation. There is evidence of this planning dating back to 1937. In a 1997 interview, the German historian Hans Mommsen claimed that a major motive for the pogrom was the desire of the Gauleiters of the NSDAP to seize Jewish property and businesses. Mommsen stated, "The need for money by the party organization stemmed from the fact that Franz Xaver Schwarz, the party treasurer, kept the local and regional organizations of the party short of money." In the fall of 1938, the increased pressure on Jewish property nourished the party's ambition, especially since Hjalmar Schacht had been ousted as Reich Minister for Economics. This, however, was only one aspect of the origin of the November 1938 pogrom. The Polish government threatened to extradite all Jews who were Polish citizens but would stay in Germany, thus creating a burden of responsibility on the German side. The immediate reaction by the Gestapo was to push the Polish Jews, 16,000 persons, over the borderline, but this measure failed due to the stubbornness of the Polish customs officers. The loss of prestige as a result of this abortive operation called for some sort of compensation. Thus, the overreaction to Herschel Grünspahn's attempt against the diplomat Ernst von Rau came into being and led to the November pogrom. The background of the pogrom was signified by a sharp cleavage of interest between the different agencies of party and state. While the Nazi Party was interested in improving its financial strength on the regional and local level by taking over Jewish property, Hermann Göring, in charge of the four-year plan, hoped to acquire access to foreign currency in order to pay for the import of urgently needed raw material. Heydrich and Himmler were interested in fostering Jewish immigration. The Zionist leadership in the British Mandate of Palestine wrote in February 1938 that according to a very reliable private source, one which can be traced back to the highest echelons of the SS leadership, there was an intention to carry out a genuine and dramatic pogrom in Germany on a large scale in the near future. In August 1938, German authorities announced that residence permits for foreigners were being cancelled and would have to be renewed. This included German-born Jews of foreign citizenship. Poland stated that it would renounce citizenship rights of Polish Jews living abroad for at least 5 years after the end of October, effectively making them stateless. In the so-called Poland auction, more than 12,000 Polish Jews, among them the philosopher and theologian Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, and future literary critic Marcel Reich-Ranitzky were expelled from Germany on October 28, 1938, on Hitler's orders. They were ordered to leave their homes in a single night and were allowed only one suitcase per person to carry their belongings. As the Jews were taken away, their remaining possessions were seized as loot both by Nazi authorities and by neighbors. The deportees were taken from their homes to railway stations and were put on trains to the Polish border, where Polish border guards sent them back into Germany. This stalemate continued for days in the pouring rain, with the Jews marching without food or shelter between the borders. 4,000 were granted entry into Poland, but the remaining 8,000 were forced to stay at the border. They waited there in harsh conditions to be allowed to enter Poland. A British newspaper told its readers that hundreds are reported to be lying about, penniless and deserted, in little villages along the frontier near where they had been driven out by the Gestapo and left. Conditions in the refugee camps were so bad that some actually tried to escape back into Germany and were shot, recalled the British woman who was sent to help those who had been expelled. The former German Kaiser Wilhelm II commented for the first time, "I am ashamed to be German." Göring, who was in favor of expropriating the property of the Jews rather than destroying it as had happened in the pogrom, directly complained to Sicherheitspolizei chief Heydrich immediately after the events, "I'd rather you had done in 200 Jews than destroy so many valuable assets. Mir wäre lieber gewesen, ihr hättet 200 Juden erschlagen und hättet nicht solche Werte vernichtet." Göring met with other members of the Nazi leadership on 12 November to plan the next steps after the riot, setting the stage for formal government action. In the transcript of the meeting, Göring said, "I have received a letter written on the Führer's orders requesting that the Jewish question be now, once and for all, coordinated and solved one way or another. I should not want to leave any doubt, gentlemen, as to the aim of today's meeting. We have not come together merely to talk again, but to make decisions, and I implore competent agencies to take all measures for the elimination of the Jew from the German economy, and to submit them to me.